Welcome back to ASMRk. I hope you're doing well. This is just a quick intro before the stories start. Today's stories are deep woods horror, so I hope you enjoy them. I hope they help you to relax, unwind, and fall asleep. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Please also leave any feedback or suggestions in the comments. With that being said, let's sit back, relax, and dive into a world of whispers and chills. I don't usually hike alone, not because I'm scared of anything specific, just because I like having someone to talk to. But that particular weekend, I needed space. Work was eating me alive, and I was dealing with some personal stuff that had me feeling trapped, like the walls were closing in every time I sat still for more than a few minutes. So I packed up and drove out to a trail I remembered from college. It wasn't one of the popular ones, no markers, no social media buzz about scenic lookouts, just an old forestry path I'd stumbled across years ago behind a campground near Eden, Vermont. I remembered it being quiet, overgrown, and long. Exactly what I needed. The weather was cold, but not unbearable. Dry leaves crackled underfoot, and the bare branches made my skin feel higher, somehow, more distant. I walked for about an hour, keeping a steady pace. There were no signs of wildlife, which I found odd even then. No birds, no squirrels, not even the rustle of something scurrying off when I passed. Just silence. But it didn't feel ominous at the time, more like nature holding its breath. After a while, the trail narrowed into a tunnel of birches. I almost turned back, but I remembered this part vaguely. I thought there might have been a stream or clearing on the other side, so I pushed forward. Maybe 5 minutes in, I noticed something weird. The path under my boots was wrong. Not muddy or rocky, flattened, as if something had rolled through here again and again, pressing everything down. I stopped and crouched, brushing aside leaves. Underneath was bare earth, pressed tight like packed clay. No tie marks, just unnaturally smooth, hard ground. I stood and looked around. The trees were still spaced close, too tight for any vehicles to get through. That's when I noticed the absence of underbrush. No ferns, no fallen limbs, no mushrooms, nothing. Just trees and flat ground. I told myself it was fine. Maybe forestry workers had cleared it years back. Maybe deer travelled this path enough to flatten it. 100 reasons to ignore what my instincts were quietly telling me. This wasn't a place things walked through. It was a place things avoided. Still, I kept going. Eventually, the path widened again, opening into a long stretch of forest with low, rolling terrain. I slowed down and started to hear something. A soft, rhythmic sound. Not animal, not wind. It took me a second to place it, because it was breathing. Not heavy, just slow and even, like someone standing off trail and trying not to be noticed. I froze. The sound didn't stop. It wasn't coming from one spot. It was surrounding me, like the trees themselves were exhaling. I turned in a slow circle, listening. The breathing faded, not like it had stopped, but like it had stepped back, moving without moving somehow. The air grew colder, but not from the wind. The temperature just dropped. I could see my breath now, short white clouds. I checked my phone, not expecting signal, but just to ground myself. The screen wouldn't turn on. That's when I realised how long it had been since I saw anything man-made. No trail markers, no wrappers, no signs anyone had ever come this way at all. I turned to retrace my steps. That's when I noticed the trees had shifted. They hadn't moved exactly, they were just different. Wrong spacing, different bars, was gone, or at least buried under more of that perfectly flat earth. I didn't panic right away. I told myself I'd just taken a wrong turn. I picked a direction I thought was right and walked. After maybe 15 minutes, I came to a tree that had something scratched into its bark. 3 deep gouges, fresh, jagged, the wood still raw and pale. I didn't like the look of them, but I pushed on. 10 minutes later, I saw another one. Same marks, 3 slashes, lower this time, then another, higher. The pattern wasn't random, they were leading me. Not in the direction I wanted to go. I stopped, took a breath, and tried to listen. Nothing, not even wind. I picked another direction and walked fast, not running. I was sweating now, despite the cold. I passed a small patch of moss that looked familiar, so I slowed down and crouched next to it. And that's when I heard it again, the breathing. But this time it wasn't distant, it was close, directly behind me. I turned quick, nothing there. But the moss I'd just stepped near was gone, replaced by that pressed down earth. I looked back the way I'd come and realised something horrible. I wasn't walking forward at all. I was walking in a loop. That's when I started to panic. I broke into a run, not caring about direction anymore, just needing to break the pattern, get out of whatever space I was caught in. I ran until I couldn't hear the breathing anymore, until the forest started to look normal again, messy, uneven, natural, fallen branches, bird calls, underbrush. I stopped when I saw the trail marker, bright orange, tacked to a birch. It didn't look familiar, but it looked official. I followed it. After maybe 20 minutes, I heard the distant hum of cars. Then the roof of the campground office appeared through the trees. I didn't stop. I drove straight home. That was 3 months ago. I haven't hiked since. I'm not the kind of person who gets spooked easily. I grew up in places where people kept to themselves, where help was a long way off, and you figured things out on your own. After my brother passed last year, I started hiking again. It's what we used to do growing up. He was always the one to push deeper, go off trail, take the sketchy path down into some valley just to see where it led. I always followed. So when I planned a weekend out in northern Minnesota, it wasn't about some survivalist challenge or getting lost on purpose. I just wanted quiet, trees, wind, and nothing else. I chose a route marked as advanced, 15 miles through the backcountry, with elevation and terrain shifts. I packed light but smart, tent, stove, GPS, compass, solar charger. I signed in at the ranger station like you're supposed to, told them I'd be back on Monday. The first day was uneventful. Dense pines, sharp slopes, the kind of silence that makes your ears feel full. I saw one other hiker around noon, a woman in her 50s maybe. She nodded, didn't stop. I remember a backpack had this weird patch stitched into it, a triangle with 3 red dots. I camped near a ridge that night. Sky was clear, cold enough that the edges of my water bottle froze. Coyotes howled far off, but that's normal up there. I fell asleep listening to the wind push through the tree canopy like waves. Day 2 is when things shifted. I was cutting southeast along a ridgeline when I noticed something off with the trees ahead. They were thinner, more spaced out, almost too uniform, not planted, but something about them felt deliberate. That's when I saw the clearing. It wasn't on my GPS, not even marked as a meadow or glade. Just a circular break in the woods, perfectly round, like someone had traced the ball onto the forest and scooped it clean. No undergrowth, no fallen branches. The grass inside was ankle high and yellowed, brittle like it hadn't rained there in months. Every tree along the edge bent slightly away from it, like the trunks had leaned back over time. I stood at the edge for a while, just watching. There was no movement, no birds, no wind. Even the buzzing bugs you usually swat at in the summer were gone. That kind of quiet makes your thoughts louder, I stepped in, just a few feet, maybe 5 or 6, and I felt it instantly. The temperature dropped. Not cold like weather, cold like presence, like standing too close to something that doesn't want you there. I turned around and walked out, fast. I didn't want to camp anywhere near it, so I pushed hard for another mile or two, until I found a decent spot between some rocky outcroppings. That night, the forest was wrong. I woke up twice, no idea why, just alert. No sound, no owls, no insects, just the crunch of dry grass, faint and steady, like someone pacing slowly in a wide circle. When I finally fell back asleep, I dreamt of my brother, except it wasn't him. Same voice, same face, but in the dream he stood inside the clearing, waving me in, smiling, but too wide, like he didn't remember how to do it right. I packed up at first light and decided to head out early, shave a day off the trip. I got a different route, sticking to higher ridges and making sure I didn't pass near that place again. But the forest didn't feel the same. I noticed things, a scarf tied around a tree, one I was sure hadn't been there the day before, a bird's nest, empty, but with a chewed up piece of blue plastic stuffed inside it like someone had planted it there. And twice I caught glimpses of movement ahead on the trail, just enough to make me stop. That flicker of someone stepping behind a trunk, vanishing around a bend. By afternoon, I knew I wasn't alone. I didn't hear anyone, didn't see anything clearly, but the way the branches were disturbed, the way pine cones were crushed underfoot in 2 different directions, someone was pacing me. Not close, just always at the edge of my range, like they were waiting for something. I camped again that night, mostly because it got too dark to move safely. I built a fire, which I normally don't bother with, sat close, kept my knife next to my sleeping pad. Every so often, I'd look up and scan the trees. At one point, I saw something between 2 trunks. It wasn't a person. I couldn't even say it was a shape. More like the space between the trees was wrong. A smear, like when you look at heat rising off asphalt, but colder somehow. Like whatever it was, bent the light around it. I stayed there for maybe 5 minutes. Didn't move, didn't come closer. Eventually, it blinked out, like someone had shut their eyes behind the trees. I didn't sleep after that. I left camp before sunrise, made it out by noon, straight to the ranger station. I signed out, said nothing. But as I walked back to my car, I saw the woman I'd passed on the trail, the one with the strange triangle patch. She was standing by a vending machine, just staring at it. When she noticed me, she gave me this odd little smile. "Did you see the clearing?" she asked. I stopped. I didn't say yes. I didn't say anything. She nodded like I had anyway. "It always finds a new spot, doesn't it?" she said, then turned away and walked off into the trees. I never saw her again. I reported the area to the DNR, left an anonymous tip with GPS coordinates. A few weeks later, I checked. That clearing, still not on any maps, still not marked as a waypoint or glade. It's not that I'm afraid of the woods, it's that I'm afraid something in them watches who steps in and waits to see who returns. I work for a company that services outdated emergency towers. You know, the old radio repeaters, backup signal posts, microwave relay points, that kind of thing. Most of them were built in the 1960s or 70s, tucked way out in the middle of nowhere. Half the time, they're half forgotten, but legally, someone still has to inspect them every couple of years. That someone is usually me. This was back in early fall. I was sent to service a signal tower on Backbone Ridge, about a 6-hour hike from the closest fire road. No trail signs, just a rough grid reference. I wasn't worried. I've done trips like that plenty of times. I planned for 2 nights, packed light, brought the usual, tarp shelter, sat phone, backup compass, weather gear. Checked in with the forestry office before I left. Nobody else was registered to be in that section of the mountain. I was completely alone out there. set up camp a couple of miles from the tower, near an old stream bed that had mostly dried out. Slept early. But the second day, that's when things went wrong. I reached the tower about 9 AM. It was in rough shape. Ivy had crawled halfway up the structure, and the access panel at the base had been broken off and tossed aside. That was the first thing that made me pause. Normally these towers are sealed tight, not vandalised, not out here. I climbed up about 40 feet and did the check. Antenna was intact, interior systems mostly untouched. But someone had been inside. There were scratched lines on the inside of the maintenance hatch, carved in, dozens of them, like tally marks, all down the metal interior. They weren't official, not inspection markings. They looked frantic. I didn't want to linger, so I logged my notes, took the GPS reading, and started heading back down the slope. That's when I noticed it. There was something off about the forest. Another sound. The smell. It wasn't rot or an animal carcass. It was a dry, burnt plastic stench, like old wiring, but stronger. It was drifting in from deeper west. Not wind carried either. It seemed like the trees themselves were giving it off. Then I saw the fabric. A piece of faded orange, fluttering near a tree about 30 yards off my return path. It was a jacket, one of those puffy, synthetic kinds, torn up and dirty, hanging from a low branch like someone had flung it there. I walked over to check. Beneath the branch, the ground was sunken, not dug, just naturally low, forming a kind of hollow. The leaves had been disturbed. Someone had definitely camped there, but a while ago. There were zip ties hanging from another branch, 6 or 7 of them, clean, untied. No tent, no backpack, no sign of recent life. Just that faint, burning wire smell. I moved on faster after that. About an hour later, I stopped to rest, and that's when I realised something was seriously wrong. My sat phone wouldn't power on. Fully charged the night before, nothing now, completely dead. Then my compass, a reliable analogue one I'd had for years, was spinning slowly, like it was floating in water. No bounce, no lock, just a slow, lazy drift. The wind had shifted, and the forest had gone so quiet I could hear my own footsteps in the dirt like I was inside a cave. I told myself I'd gone too far in, maybe hit some magnetic interference from the tower, but the gut feeling didn't care about logic. I was being watched, not followed, watched. It's like I'd crossed into a place that didn't know what people were supposed to be. I pushed on fast, relying on memory to backtrack, but the woods started to look different. Twists in the trail that weren't there before. A boulder I didn't pass earlier, now sitting dead centre in the path. My own boot prints in the dirt, but heading the wrong way. Like I'd double back somehow, even though I never turned. I stopped, took a breath, and then I heard it, high up, not far off, a metallic click, followed by a grinding groan, like stressed steel. I knew that sound. The tower. The top of the tower was moving, not falling, rotating, just barely, like something had shifted up there. Then silence again. No animals, no insects, not even birds. I made camp early that evening, hoping rest would help me orient in the morning. I didn't build a fire, didn't eat. I just sat in the dark, tarp pulled low, and tried not to flinch every time leaves rustled. At some point around midnight, I heard snapping branches. Not just one, several, in a slow circle around the perimeter of my camp. Not a bear, too methodical, no growling, no crashing, just this steady cracking, like someone slowly putting weight on every twig on purpose. Eventually, it stopped. Then, faintly, click, click, click. That same tower sound, from less than 50 feet away. I didn't sleep that night. I hiked at first light, dead reckoning my way back toward the fire road. It took me 10 hours. When I reached the forestry office and told the ranger what happened, He didn't write anything down, just nodded slowly and said, "Yeah, that area gets weird sometimes." I asked if anyone had gone missing out there. He said not recently, but when I pressed, he pulled a file from under the desk. 6 names, all contractors or hikers. Last seen in that same grid square. Last entry was from 1998. None found. I haven't taken a backwoods job since. I took the job because I needed the money. An old guy named Milton owned several acres of dense forest near the state line and wanted someone to walk the perimeter once a month, just to make sure no one was camping or hunting illegally. It sounded simple enough. He even drew the boundary on a printed map and handed me an old GPS device to follow it with. I remember him being very specific. Stick to the line, don't go wandering, and don't step inside the old fencing if you find it. I asked him what fencing he was talking about. Some of it's still standing, he said. Old family plots or something like that. Doesn't matter now. Just leave them be. So I said sure. $50 for a few hours of hiking. Easy. The first couple of times I went out, it was uneventful. Quiet forest, nothing weird. Saw a fox, some turkeys, a dozen deer. Normal stuff. Then, on my 3rd trip out, early November, I noticed the path ahead got unusually straight. The GPS line and the actual trail were in perfect sync, which felt strange out there. Forest trails are never that clean. After maybe 10 minutes of walking in that straight line, I started to get this feeling, like I was being watched. I chalked it up to nerves or the wind, but when I checked the GPS, it looked glitched. The line I was following was just spinning. I tapped it, recalibrated, still spinning. Then the trail forked, 2 equally worn paths diverging in front of me. One went slightly uphill, the other down, but neither followed the GPS anymore. I stood there for a full minute, listening. No birds, no leaves rustling, just that cold, brittle kind of silence that makes your teeth feel tight. I chose the uphill path because it seemed to follow the direction I remembered from the map. A few 100 feet up, I saw it. The fence. It wasn't tall, maybe 3 feet. Twisted, rusted iron stakes with loops of barbed wire in between. Overgrown, half fallen. But the boundary was clear. You could see how trees outside the fence looked different, taller, healthier. Inside, they were pale, not white, just washed out, like something had drained the pigment from the bark. I stopped a few feet from it, remembering what Milton said. I checked the GPS again, still spinning. That's when I noticed the smell. Just this weird, metallic tang, like wet pennies and burned hair. There was something just inside the fence too. Not a grave marker, at least not a traditional one. It was a wooden bowl, snapped at the top, with thin carvings running down its length. Not English, not anything I recognised. Almost like tally marks, but not evenly spaced. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned fast. Nothing, no one. But the leaves under my boots were disturbed, shifted slightly as if something had just passed by. I started to back away from the fence. Then something moved inside it. Not fast, not sudden. Just a figure way back between the washed out trees. Tall, barefoot, wearing a shirt that looked like it had once been red, now stained and grey. I froze. The figure lifted its arm and pointed. Not at me, but behind me. I turned. Nothing was there. I looked back and the figure was gone. But something else had changed. The The trail was no longer behind me. It was just more of that pale, lifeless forest. No sign of the path I'd come in on. The fence was now in front of me on both sides. I panicked, pulled out the GPS again, still useless. So I did the only thing I could. I started walking in the opposite direction of the fence, just hoping I'd find a road or clearing, or anything to reorient myself. About 10 minutes later, I came across something I'll never forget. A wooden sign nailed to a tree. It was old and weathered, but someone had etched fresh letters into it with a knife. Stay out. I didn't wait. I ran. Branches snapped at my jacket. I tripped twice, scraped my palms open. I didn't stop until I hit a break in the trees and saw the road, my truck just visible through the brush. I didn't even look back. I locked it with shaking hands and drove out of there. Didn't check the mirrors once. When I called Milton later to tell him I was quitting the job, he didn't act surprised. All he said was, "I told you not to cross the line." I hadn't, not technically, but something did, and I'm pretty sure it followed me out.